Hey, we're here because we are talking about just a small indie film that came out this week. It's called The Avengers.
War has started. And we are hopelessly outgunned.
Director Fury, I think it's time.
You here with a mission, sir? Trying to get me back in the world?
Trying to save it.
Doctor, I need you to come in.
What if I say no?
I'll persuade you.
What are you asking me to do? It's called the Avengers Initiative.
I thought I didn't qualify. Apparently I'm, what is it, volatile, self-obsessed, and don't play well with others.
I think they need a timeout.
That was from the trailer for The Avengers, which is out everywhere worldwide as you're listening to this podcast. And I just want to point out also that if you want to find more episodes of the Slash Filmcast, you can go to slashfilmcast.com. Email us. Let us know what you think of the podcast at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. So as I already mentioned, all we're doing today is talking about The Avengers. And actually, we're going to be responding to some listener email as well. But let's get right into it. So The Avengers is directed by Joss Whedon. And this is an interesting movie for a variety of reasons. It's a unique pop culture artifact just because of... I don't think anything like this has ever been attempted before. And by anything like this, I mean you have 4 or 5 standalone movies that introduce characters leading to a separate movie in which all of the characters are combined. Drew, help me out. Do you think there's been anything of this scope that's been attempted before in, cinema history, I guess?
Not really. And it's as if in the mid-'80s somebody said, okay, we're going to have a Lethal Weapon sequel that's also going to have John McClane, and it's also going to have the dude from Predator, and it's, it is, which, by the way, I would have watched the crap out of back then. But it's a really unique thing to try and build, and for them to have sort of not only gotten the individual films pretty right building up to it, but then to have hired the right guy and really pulled off this final film, I think it's unprecedented. And I think when you look at the anticipation and you look at how excited people are, both in markets where it's already open and here where it's about to open, it kind of reflects that it is unique. I think people know that this is not something they've seen before, and that they're excited to see if it works.
Mm-hmm. Right, and
it's not even the final film. It's just another piece of the puzzle.
Right,
they're going to keep going from here.
So, although how they're going to do that is a big question I have in mind, but we can talk about that later. One question I have for all of you guys, starting with Drew, is before we even talk about the movie itself, I'm curious about how we can even evaluate this movie, because do you evaluate it as a standalone film? Do you evaluate it as a sequel? Do we assume pre-knowledge of all the stuff that's happened in the previous 5 films? And I'm assuming, yeah. I would argue maybe not. Okay, and the 5 films I'm talking about are Incredible Hulk, Thor, Captain America, Iron Man 1 and 2. Right? Am I missing any? I think that's it, right?
Nope, that's it. That's the build-up to this one.
Right. So how do you evaluate? How do you approach evaluating it? Can we take it as its own movie, or do you?
You can. I mean, I think it's perfectly enjoyable as its own movie, but at the same time, if you saw Thor, and I feel like Thor was the big prequel to this one because it introduced the villain, it introduced some of the greater outer space elements that play a big role in this movie. So, and that's actually I think partially what held Thor back, because it always felt like a prequel to this movie and not a great movie on its own.
Interesting. Yeah,
at least it was worth it.
And I would say that Captain America is the other direct prequel, because in that one you also have the Cube. And I think that my wife had seen neither of those, and as soon as she saw the Avengers trailer, she was like, "All right, fine, hand them over." And for her, it was necessary to see those two to really understand just the hit the ground running, what this movie does, what its plot does. I think you do have to see the pieces of it leading up, and it is hard to evaluate as a standalone film. It's even hard to evaluate outside of genre. I think, within the superhero world, it does something somewhat unique, but it's a hard film to just approach by itself, And in some ways, I think that's what Marvel designed. They kind of wanted something that by the time you got to this, you're in or you're out. Either you're ready for this kind of a movie, or it's just not going to appeal to you on any level.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a classic comic book team-up, right? Where you have different universes or different series coming together, and if you didn't read any of those series, then you're kind of screwed. So you got to go back and buy all the books. It's an ingenious model, in a way.
Last question before we dive into the film. Adam Quigley, where and when did you see this movie?
I saw it last week in Amsterdam. I went to IMAX 3D viewing of it.
Gotcha. Yeah, so this movie came out in Amsterdam before it came out in the U.S.
So un-American.
Which is the way of the future, apparently. And what was the audience reaction like, Adam?
Very talkative. Yeah, people were too enthusiastic, I'd say.
I see.
But there were certain moments where it was worth having a big crowd to see the film with.
Right. And there's certain moments in this movie where you can't help but squeal verbally. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's my opinion anyway. All right, well...
I cut out a few of them during the course of the film. I took a friend of mine to the first viewing. I took my wife to see it the second time, and that first viewing was a lot of, oh my God. And I'm fairly sure I was not alone in the theater doing that.
So, Drew McWeeny, why don't you just tell us your general thoughts on The Avengers and talk, I read your review at hitfix.com, which is very glowing, but I'm wondering what your most significant issues with the film are, if any.
Well, I think it's got the same problem a lot of Hollywood plotting does, which is that it's basically you're running around chasing a glowing doodad. And ultimately, who cares? The doodad itself is utterly unimportant and not terribly interesting, and they can speak earnestly about the Tesseract as many times as they want, but it's not a terribly compelling thing to chase. It's not like, I still think one of the great setups for any movie in my lifetime was that moment in Raiders of the Lost Ark where I was sitting in the theater and they have that first lecture where they lay out what the Ark is and what it does and what's inside. And the awe that John Williams and Steven Spielberg and the performers managed to summon in that moment is tangible. It's something that for the rest of the movie then you are worried about that box being opened. You know what's inside there. The cube is far less compelling as a device, and ultimately it just serves to open a doorway so a bunch of army guys and giant space dragons can come roaring through. Mm-hmm. And as such, I'm not terribly compelled by pieces of the plot or by some of the mechanics of the movie. But what this film has going for it that is totally different is Joss Whedon. And I feel like this is, for him, it's almost as if up until now he's been in school and he's been practicing and he's been rehearsing and he's been working on the shape of this thing that he's going to make. And it feels like a full season of one of his television shows jammed into 2.5 hours, complete with the ups and the downs and the killing characters that you love and the, turns of people's behavior. And ultimately, what Joss brings to the table is the thing that makes this work, which is an understanding of the character dynamics and a voice that perfectly captures what it is we love about superheroes and about their behavior. I think he understands just how insane that whole idea is, the notion of superpowered beings. Mm-hmm. And I think he's one of the few guys out there who I think could have pulled this balancing act off.
Devindra Hardwar, your thoughts on The Avengers?
Frankly, guys, I was totally disappointed in this movie. No, I'm kidding. This movie is actually a freaking miracle. So we've gushed about how impossible putting all these characters together, weaving all these narrative arcs together, how crazy that is. But Whedon is pretty much the perfect person for this. Like, he's been doing this his entire career. He's used to ensemble casts. He knows the geek mythology, and he knows how to be a geek and how to also, he knows he can respect these characters, but also implement them very well when necessary. So, this movie for me is fantastic. It's better than I could have hoped. But I do agree with you, Drew, that some of the mechanics, especially the villains, where they talk about the names and they're introduced very quickly in the beginning, but they really don't play much of a role in the movie other than being the force that they have to fight against.
They're fairly faceless.
Yeah, they're just like crazy monster things. So it's like that sort of anonymity kind of keeps the threats down a bit, even though as they're tearing apart, cities and whatnot. I would have liked to see more in that, and then I have a feeling of like that was among the 30 minutes of cut footage or whatever they had.
Quigley, your thoughts?
I actually kind of want to respond to both what Drew and Devindra said. I actually totally disagree about that really being an issue in the film. I actually completely agree with what you're saying, but I kind of think that's the best thing that Joss Whedon brought to this film, which is that the real threat of this film isn't even the villain. Because these guys could take them out if they could actually work together. But that's the real problem with the film is, can these guys actually work together? And that's what Joss Whedon does best. He has a great sense of family. You watch Buffy and you watch the dysfunctionality between all the characters, but you still feel that they're this unit that's working together. And to see essentially this being the film that brings all these characters together and just watching them basically butt heads, it totally makes sense to have these guys as their individual films. Like they're the leaders with their own issues, their own egos, and suddenly to throw them all in the mix together is great. And I just love seeing the constant sort of pair-ups that Joss Whedon played with. He knows what makes these characters interesting. He knows what their strengths and weaknesses are, and he knows how to write them in a way that shows off both of those things. And also he amazingly has a great sense of action. He knows what makes the characters cool in battle. And I think he kind of nailed every single aspect of the characters, and seeing him finally get a budget that actually allows him to play with his toys essentially on this scale is kind of a sight to behold.
Yeah.
That's the first thought that I had coming out is I wish I had lived next door to Joss when I was still playing with action figures. Because, oh my God, he must have been the best dude to play action figures with.
Yeah.
That's exactly what this was like.
Well, we've talked in the past on the Slash Filmcast about how conceiving of action scenes in a way where each character can make a substantial contribution to the battle must be very challenging. And you can tell when a movie does that well and when it does it poorly. One example of a movie that does it well was X-Men First Class, where it really felt like they thought through how each character's powers could kind of contribute to the cause. Here, I think they did the same thing as well. And not only that, but it's not too much of a spoiler to say that the sort of movie climaxes with a gigantic, enormous action scene, which you see throughout the trailers. And he's very generous as a filmmaker. Like he will give you the money shots, but do it in a long, continuous shot with another money shot. You know what I mean? Like if you are aware of how action scenes are usually put together, he will. Joss Whedon does things in this scene or in this set piece that wows you. And and does give you that sense of wonder at what these creatures, these superheroes, are capable of. And
he wows you in a very casual manner. Like it feels like it's so effortless.
Yes. It doesn't feel like
the movie is just it's exhaustingly awesome in like almost every scene.
It doesn't feel like it's drawing attention to itself in the way that it does. A long continuous shot with Iron Man flying through the city streets and through a tunnel. It doesn't feel like he's being that conspicuous about it. But if you are paying attention, you appreciate it. And that's what I like about this movie. You guys have already said this is a Herculean task, a Hulkian task, one could say, to unite the. I know that was awesome. To unite these characters into one film, and there are so many ways it could have gone wrong. To even pull off a mediocre film would have been an achievement, but to pull off a film that actually amazes you and it thrills you and gives each character something to do. I think it was, very, very impressive, and I think this film totally delivers on its promise. I have a bunch of issues with the movie, which we can talk about during spoilers, but other than that, yeah, I think if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably going to go see this movie, and so we don't really need to talk much more about that. One disappointment, Drew, that you brought up in your review that I actually completely agree with is the score of this movie, which was Alan Silvestri, right, has written some of the most memorable scores. Back to the Future, right? He wrote Back to the Future. That was a great score. But this was a totally blah score, right? And your thoughts on that, Drew?
Well, it's something that I feel like Silvestri got handed this project at a point where it was too late to do anything.
Right.
And his score is fine. It's functional. It does what it's supposed to do. But if they had pursued the path from the very beginning, that each film had to have its memorable, iconic score and its theme, so that by the time we got to this movie, it's hand the 5 themes to a composer and say, okay, now play with all of these together. That could have been really exciting just on an audio level in a way that we've never seen before. Because it would make it that one extra level further of you being involved and being excited by what you're hearing and seeing. And as it is, the Marvel movies typically have been wallpaper, and they're fine. The scores are functional. I thought Sylvester's score for Captain America was probably the best of the bunch, and I think the Thor score is okay, but none of them are iconic. Mm-hmm. There's not one of them that has a theme that's on par with Superman or Batman or Star Wars or Raiders, and really, when you're doing a character this big, he has to have a signature. He has to have that iconic thing that you hear when he's arriving in the movie.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Downey actually does get that, and actually this kind of goes to what you're saying, because that's a really great moment. It's when he gets the AC/DC moment.
Yeah.
Which I like that he actually does it. That it's actually him patching through a speaker to introduce himself. That's perfect for his character. He knows the value of theme music.
Right. Exactly. Let me ask you guys this question, and Drew, we can start with you, which is like, what did you make of the villain character, the Tom Hiddleston character? Did you see the narrative through line between Thor and this movie? Like, in Thor, obviously, he has much more of an emotional journey. Here, he's kind of more of a cartoony villain. Just what did you make of him? Like, he was one of the best parts about Thor. I don't necessarily think he was one of the best parts about this film. Your thoughts on that?
I do like the evolution. I think that it makes sense that the longer he is away from home and the longer he is dealing with these issues, the more animal he's getting. I think they really lucked out in casting Hiddleston for Thor. And, he was originally, when they came down to it, it was him or Hemsworth for either role. They had brought them in for both. And so it was really a case of Branagh, who had worked with him before on that the detective show that they did in England, saying, Loki's the better character. Trust me, you want to play Loki. That's the character. And so whereas he intentionally started to lean down, Hemsworth went off and started to beef up. But they both kind of started in the middle. And I really feel like they got lucky with Hiddleston because he is charismatic. I think one of the very best scenes in the movie is him being interrogated by Black Widow.
Yep.
And I think there's a genuine malice to him in this film that is really beneficial. James Rocky has been complaining, and we were at a screening the other night, and he brought up Mission Impossible 4, and he said that the reason he preferred that to this is because Mission Impossible 4 had a villain with a face, whereas the Avengers doesn't.
That makes no sense whatsoever.
I'm like, dude, you can't say that because of Hiddleston. Yes, I understand that the army becomes somewhat generic wallpaper, and they're just dudes who get smashed and beaten and pulped and whatever. But Hiddleston is so present and so great, and he has truly some of the film's better moments, both with the heroes and on his own. So I feel like you cannot undersell the importance of casting him and then seeing the way he's brought it from film to film.
Mm-hmm. He has a great, just a psychotic grin that I think is perfect for a villain. Like, just him smiling, and that's real. We see that a lot in this movie. It's kind of makes your skin crawl. And actually, the villain in Mission Impossible 4, that's one thing we brought up as kind of a weak point in our review, or at least I did, because that villain, he was interesting, but he was kind of boring, and they didn't really give him much to do. Like, the real villains of that movie were the set pieces and all the challenges they had to deal with.
Right.
But I don't know.
He was unique in that he was one of the only nuclear physicists / special forces people that you've ever seen. But other than that, there was not much to him that was very interesting. Yeah. Adam, any thoughts on the villain here, Tom Hiddleston here?
I don't think they could have cast someone better to utter the line "Mewling Quim."
I can't believe they got away with that in a Marvel movie. That's an unbelievable.
So any other thoughts on this movie before we move into spoilers? I have a lot more stuff to say, but I just don't want to give anything away because there's so much.
I mean, I think it's worth saying, some of the surprises that I had. I was shocked at how much I loved Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. And I think this is because, we saw Eric Bana as Hulk, we saw Edward Norton, but Ruffalo gets Banner down. Like, I think that was the real key. Like, he plays Banner like a nervous high school science teacher that's about to pop at any moment.
Right.
So
Yeah.
he has some great scenes of like where he kind of surprises us with his intensity, and he also has a great dynamic with Robert Downey Jr., which is really important. For those
and that's the thing that surprised me most was and I guess I've never considered it in the comics, but the fact that Joss picked it up and played it so beautifully, the idea that these guys are both genius scientists, and the moment they get together, that's their bond.
Yeah.
That there's that thing of, well, I've got great toys. I can't wait to show you my toys. Come upstairs with me. I don't think I've ever read that in any Avengers comics between Banner and Stark, and I think it's a really clever way to bond the two of them.
Right. And their first interaction is pretty awesome as well. So Downey, I think Downey Jr. is my MVP. Like a lot of people said Hulk was MVP, but I actually think that Robert Downey Jr. does a great job here, especially towards the end of the movie. I'm not going to say what happens, but I thought he was continues kind of his charismatic turn as Tony Stark here, and I just really. I thought the screen lit up with energy every time he was on the screen.
I think it's also important.
Well, Whedon knows exactly how to utilize the Tony Stark character, just because he is the snarky one, and Joss Whedon is so good with the self-aware snark.
Right.
So every opportunity he gets to sort of poke fun at this film that otherwise takes itself pretty seriously, he definitely takes advantage of it.
Drew, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, and it would have been very easy based on the success of Iron Man and Iron Man 2 and what his charisma is like, for him to overpower this film. And I think it's a real testament both to Joss and to Downey, and the fact that he understands what this is, that he doesn't overpower the movie, that he's there for support, he's there to punch a few scenes, he's there to, play his part, but I don't ever feel like he tries to turn it into the Robert Downey Jr. show, which I think was a legitimate fear going in.
Right, yeah.
Well, the character does, though. That's actually what makes it interesting, is the Tony Stark clearly does think of it as like his show.
Yeah.
But that's actually what Joss knows gets so well. He understands the fact of how these characters work and how they would interact with each other, and that Tony Stark would just be this completely self-centered guy that wants to do everything on his own. And same thing with Thor, you have a god. Captain America sees himself as the Boy Scout. He understands how these characters would interact in a room with one another, and it's what makes all their interactions so interesting.
I think it was in the Wired interview with Whedon where he talked about his main thesis behind putting the Avengers together is that all of these characters don't belong together. They are loners in a sense. For different reasons, they work best alone. So when you put them together in a team like this, it's a volatile combination. You kind of have to explore all those angles. I've also been, in other interviews I've read, I think he's basically shitting on Zach Penn's original version of the script. He keeps talking about how Marvel had nothing there for the film, and when he pretty much did a page one rewrite. So I'm not sure how much of Zach Penn's stuff ended up in the film. I'd be interesting to see what the differences
it started
are.
off as a screenplay by Zach Penn and ended up as written by Joss Whedon, story by Zach Penn and Joss
Which is
Whedon.
not a good sign for him. Yeah.
Which I think it's ultimately the basic building blocks had to be there simply because they'd already laid so much groundwork for them that we know that you're chasing the cube. We know that it's Loki coming back because of this. We know that, it's those blocks, I think, were what Penn and the Marvel team had put in place. But it's the meat of it that really was Joss.
Right. One last issue I want to bring up before we move into spoilers, and this is a non-spoilery issue, is honestly, I have a wardrobe issue, which is that Captain America looks kind of silly in this movie. It's just me. All the other heroes have costumes that make sense, but his thing kind of looks a little outdated. Was I the only one that thought that, or clearly yes by the silence?
Well, he's an outdated character.
Yeah, I know, but why?
Definitely they play that up.
Why not? Upgrade the sort of armor or whatever to something that makes sense in the modern world. He just looks goofy.
Seems like the mask.
David. We could use a little old fashioned.
Drew, what were you gonna say?
I think the symbolism of it makes sense, but I think there are some functional issues I would have with it.
Right.
The mask just makes no sense at all.
Right.
He's Steve Rogers. He's not hiding from anybody. How about you give him a full range of vision? Because that would seem like something in battle that would be fairly important.
Indeed. I agree with you completely, Drew. So it was form over function in this case, and the form wasn't particularly good. All right. I think that's...
Wouldn't it make sense as protection?
It didn't really strike that helmet he was wearing didn't seem like it was bulletproof, Adam. That's all I'm saying.
I think the idea that it was supposed to be protection. I don't think it was supposed to be hiding his identity.
All right,
Okay.
all right, fair enough. That interesting interpretation there, but well, in any case, The Avengers, it's out in theaters all around the world right now. Go check it out because it's pretty awesome. But we're going to talk about some spoilers starting right now.
Now you're looking for the secret.
You're going to see this coming.
No,
But you won't find it because, of course,
you're not going to see this coming.
you're not really looking.
I have been puzzling over how it works.
You don't really want to work it out.
Who's in the box?
I have been dying to tell you. I want to tell you my secret.
You want to be fooled.
Spoilers coming up right now for The Avengers. So, guys, I got to ask you this question, and you tell me if you feel the same way about this. What did you think of the way Agent Coulson was treated in this movie? Let's start with Drew.
Look, I think Clark Gregg has benefited more than anybody from the build-up to this. His character was literally an exposition carrier when he was created, and they knew that, okay, we just got to have a dude who kind of is S.H.I.E.L.D. and does a few things and says a few things, and it was – I don't think it was ever a character. I think from the moment he arrives in this film, he and Scarlett are the two that benefit the most from what Joss writes for them. I think he automatically starts to get fleshed out. I like the relationship that he has with Gwyneth, and I especially like that Tony has no clue that it even happened. That how do you know his first name? When did you guys ever speak? I like that, and I like the build-up. I also like seeing that he's a fan of something. Up until now, he's been such a hard ass with Stark that to see his attitude with Captain America humanizes him. All of a sudden, oh, okay, he actually is kind of a gushing kid when it comes to somebody else, and it's because of the iconic nature of Captain America versus this dude who is not living up to potential and is kind of a pain in the ass, and it's a really interesting dynamic that he gets to play. And then, yes, Joss needs to give us somebody to rally around, and I think Clark is the exact right choice. I think Coulson is the right guy for that job.
Interesting. Okay. I got to say, I'm not sure it entirely worked for me. Just, you know what it reminded me of a little bit? And I don't know if this is a perfect analogy, so I'm like kind of playing it out right now in front of you guys. But it reminded me of how the Raiders of the Lost Ark to Last Crusade, the Marcus Brody character in those movies.
Ooh.
Whereas in the first movie, Brody is like this dignified, intelligent professor, and then in the last movie, he's just basically like comic relief.
Yeah, well, that's one of my great pet peeves of all time. They ruined Marcus Brody.
Right, and here, so I felt like, Clark Gregg, throughout all the 5 films that we mentioned that lead up to this one, has been a source of gravitas and professionalism. And then here, he's basically used for comic relief with the cards and everything. And then they kind of use the cards as a way to motivate the people, but I just didn't know how I felt about that. I felt like they could have done...
It's not just him being used for comic relief, though. Like, everybody gets comedic moments, because this is Joss Whedon.
No, I get that, but that was all he was used for. Like, he had almost nothing other than that. And that's kind of what... I just wonder if we could have had a little bit more of the Clark Gregg character so that his death ultimately means more than it does in this movie. Devindra, go ahead.
I don't know. I don't know what you're saying, because...
I've never cared about that guy until Joss Whedon humanized him with funny dialogue.
Okay.
He was a cog in the S.H.I.E.L.D. machine in all these movies up until now, where he's a person. He gets a name. His name is Phil. And that's all very important. And I kind of love the way that Fury was, using his death and everything to manipulate them into action. That shows kind of the shadiness of the S.H.I.E.L.D. side of things as well. But I don't know. Clark Gregg was great, and leave it up to Whedon, right, to make you care about a character and then stab him in the back. Like, that is exactly what that guy does. Damn you, Joss Whedon.
Yeah, Whedon was thinking specifically, he was like, okay, I have to make the audience care more about Agent Coulson so that when he dies, they'll be sad.
Exactly.
Fair enough. So maybe then it speaks to what the other movies were not able to accomplish.
I think so. I think in a big way we see examples here of course correction. Scarlett's the best example, where up until now in Iron Man 2, she's literally not a character. She is there to have that one scene with Favreau where she kicks a bunch of ass, and that's it. There's really nothing else to her.
Right.
And from her first moment in this movie, she's written on a different level, which you see how she controls an interrogation while tied to a chair. You see how she manages the people in a room and how confident and smart she is, and it's a totally different level of writing. And you
that scene totally made me think that Joss Whedon should do a Charlie's Angels movie.
Oh yeah, I could see that absolutely.
Couple of other nerd nitpicks that kind of bothered me, and again, maybe you guys will shoot these down as well, and that's totally fine. That's part of the pleasure of this podcast. Is the whole Hulk thing, like, that just didn't seem to be like it was explained very well, right? Like the whole, we've never seen, until this movie, we've never seen Hulk really that much in control of what the hell is going on, except for that one moment, I think, in the Ong Lee movie where like Liv Tyler gets him to stop like destroying everything. There haven't been that many moments where Hulk is like in control and able to work as part of a team. And this movie's just like, okay, well, I guess Mark Ruffalo figured out a way, right? Like, is that, you know what I mean? There's just no explanation there, and that kind of bothered me.
There was an explanation, though.
Okay, what is your explanation?
When they're actually attacked, that's when it's brought out against his will. But otherwise, he even says, like, how he's able to keep himself in control is that he's always angry, so he's basically, at a moment's notice, is able to let himself change. And so in that circumstance, yes, he is able to have just enough control that he can actually use the Hulk in the way he can kind of direct where the carnage goes with the Hulk. But we even see, like, they even play a lot of that up for comedic moments as well, when he just, like, punches Thor, and that, I think, one of the movie's two best moments.
Right. I don't know. It just, I kind of wish there had been a little bit more there as well. Just that this idea that this guy, I thought that moment that you were talking about, Adam, was awesome. He's like, I'm always angry, and you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like, he's such an angry guy, and then now he's like letting it loose, and that's cool to see that he's at what it kind of reframes everything until that point. You're like, oh, he's actually been keeping himself under control this whole time in a really intense effort. And that's cool. That's cool.
I do think there's some of that in the film. As I understand it, that's most of what's on the floor. Is there's a lot of Hulk on the floor.
Gotcha.
And there's a fair amount of Captain America in his personal life that's on the floor. And in both cases, it was a pacing thing where they looked at it and said, look, it's all about getting the forward momentum rolling in this film. And with Hulk, I think you hear it in the fact that it's been a year since he's had an incident. I think you see it in the way he behaves in that scene where Scarlet comes to get him, that the Hulk from the first film probably would have come out well before the end of that scene.
Right.
Simply from fear, simply from panic. But he seems very aware, and I love the gentle pokes that Tony's making at him the whole time they're on board the helicarrier, where he wants to see it. And you can see that he's right up close looking at him like, what's going to happen? And it takes a lot to shake him on board the helicarrier. And when he does, he really loses control, and that's why that first scene is so scary. But the second scene is all about the fact that, no, he has mastered this to some extent, and the consciousness is in there, which it wasn't in the first two films.
Right.
There was far less of him in there, and not just the performance capture, but how he's written indicates that, no, he's more present now. That's more of Banner as the Hulk.
Okay, well, I think you guys have dashed my criticisms expertly, but I think you do point out that, yeah, maybe there's a lot of more characterization on the cutting room floor that didn't make it into the movie.
They can explain it more, certainly.
Yeah. That's all I'm asking for. And then this whole thing that this is like this huge plot point of how Loki is able to control people's minds and just bop them in the head and that fixes it. It just seemed kind of lame to me. Just like, oh well, I guess that explains everything. But
okay, Dave.
All right, I'm just saying. Okay, no one takes my criticism seriously. That's fine.
I mean, it's sort of like I can't believe that a man can grow into a towering green Hulk monster. I can't believe an alien can fly with a hammer. I can't believe that Tony Stark.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I can believe
box of scraps.
I can believe all those things. That's what I'm willing to give all that. It's
though?
I guess it's just when you introduce stuff like that, it does to some degree, and I'm being serious here. It does potentially lower the stakes if you don't establish the rules in a particularly compelling way.
It's a pretty clear rule. He taps people on the heart, he controls them. Like, that's it. And then when it comes to the Iron Man scene, it's kind of hilarious how that comes back.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
But
I don't see how that they just established a pretty simple rule there that he has the power to control minds.
it seems like there was a fair amount of Hawkeye that wasn't on camera between when they thunk him and when he wakes up. And there's even still that moment as he's waking up where you can see him shaking it off. Mm-hmm. And I think with Hawkeye, it's more a case of him personally wrestling it down once he sees Scarlet, once he realizes where he is, once he's able to kind of get his head around him, around the situation. I don't think it was just the thunk on the head, but I certainly think that, it dropped him out of Loki's direct sphere of influence. What I'm curious about in the film is how clearly it reads that there's a few moments in the movie where Loki's presence and the presence of whatever that thing is in his staff is what is inciting the heroes to fight each other, and what is inciting the anger, and what is bringing up their willingness to fight. Because certainly that scene on the helicarrier, I feel like when Banner ends up with the thing in his hand, that's no accident. I feel like the reason they accelerate so greatly in that scene is because of the outside influence. I don't think it's necessarily they would have gotten to that point where they're ready to throw down and fight each other without Loki working on them.
Interesting.
And I don't think the film emphasizes that enough. I think it's in there, but I think that if they've undersold any idea in the movie, it's that one.
You guys, Devindra and Adam, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I saw the film twice, and that's something I can totally get on board with. I think just the nature, and actually, David, and this actually kind of supports what you're saying, like just the nature of like what the staff and like the cube and all these things can do. Some of them are underexplained, and the movie moves at such a fast clip as well. Like the dialogue is just so witty, you're trying to take in these jokes, but at the same time, layered underneath the jokes are like bits of exposition and bits of character interaction, and just trying to process it all. It can be pretty overwhelming, especially since these are so many different comic book universes being all thrust together. And I mean, in my opinion, this is probably the most comic book movie ever made. It's just having all these different silly elements at play, and you need to sort of ground them a bit and make them understandable to an audience. And I think the film does as good of a job as I think it could have with the running time it has, while also still not just be turning into this constant supply of exposition. But yeah, maybe things could have been tweaked a little bit to make it more understandable.
That was the balancing act. They became really, really difficult towards the end of post. And look, I know that they were under the gun on this thing. They brought in new effects teams in January to help fill out the army so that ILM could just finish the Hulk.
Right, and actually, if you look at the trailer, like the first trailer for the movie, it's pretty remarkable how few of the special effects are complete. Like it's actually just straight up unfinished footage in the first trailer, where like there's stuff blowing up, but you don't see where the like bombs are coming from. There's stuff in the building, like in the final scene. There's this really cool shot where this woman goes towards this cafe window, and in the reflection, you see the building getting destroyed. And in the trailer, the building is not getting destroyed. It's just there. So yeah, you can tell they're really like rushed to get this done on time.
Indeed. The one thing I wish they didn't give away in the trailer was Hulk saving Iron Man, because it's such a key moment, right? And it's like at that point you feel as if something could happen. Like maybe he could potentially die, and that could be something that they deal with in Iron Man 3. But yeah, when you give away that in the trailer, you know exactly how Iron Man's going to get saved.
So first of all, I didn't actually watch the trailer, which is why I'm grateful that I didn't see that. But then also, you could have chosen so many other moments that weren't spoilery.
Like why choose
the movie has so much action. Why? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny. I asked specifically about that, and I guess Marvel had tested about 7 different versions of the trailer in Disney, and that shot spiked their scores every single time. So anytime they had a trailer with that particular shot in it, the scores doubled. And they went, what? It's that good a shot.
Imagine what the scores would have been like if people were surprised and saw it in the movie.
I know. I know.
That's not a good explanation. It's like, why didn't they reveal Tony Stark's like new Iron Man suit in the trailer? Why didn't they reveal like every cool moment? Like, I bet if you did a compressed like 3-minute trailer with just every single cool shot in the Avengers, the scores would have been through the roof. How is that an explanation?
Right.
Well, it's unfortunately it's that horrible push me pull you between the filmmakers, who I'm sure had no interest in that shot being in the trailer, and the marketing department, whose job is simply to open the movie. And I find that marketing departments have so little regard for the experience that you'll have once you're there, For them, it's literally their job is
get
they
butts
need
and
that
seats.
opening weekend,
Yeah.
they need that number, and they'll do anything to get it.
Right.
So it's a horrible tension that exists now between the filmmakers and the people selling their product.
Indeed, and we actually discuss that tension frequently on this show. Let's. So there's a couple things I like about. I don't want to come off just as a negative Nelly about this movie or a negative word that starts the male name. But one of the things I liked was when I was in Chinese school growing up. There's this kind of like fable that they taught us about this guy who's selling a spear and a shield, and he's like, this spear can pierce any material imaginable, and this shield can block any material imaginable. And it was like, well, what happens when the spear meets the shield? And it was kind of this like paradox or whatever. Think about that, guys. But no, in terms of this movie, you see what happens when an immovable weapon meets an immovable shield. And I've always wanted to see what happens, and I think this movie did not disappoint in terms of showing that. The other thing I wanted
this movie does a lot of that.
Yeah.
Joss Whedon like knows what makes this interesting. It's like, okay, like, well, this guy has a fucking hammer that can conjure lightning, and then he strikes Tony Stark's Iron Man suit with it. So you think like, oh, his suit's being destroyed, and then they have another little fun moment where it's like 400%. There's so many great individual moments like that throughout the film.
I like how another moment with the hammer is when like Hulk can't pick up the hammer.
That's just the animation of the Hulk like a little kid trying to pick it up and just getting annoyed.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. But one of the kind of highlights of this movie I thought was Drew, you posted this review on your site by this gentleman that used to write on AICN, right? What was the guy's name?
Yes.
I'm sorry. What was his name again?
Neil Cumston.
Neil Cumston.
And yeah, he is a longtime contributor and friend.
And he said something like, "Dude, Tony Stark does something mad heroic at the end," and it's totally true. Like, it happens so quickly, you don't even have time to really register it. Mm-hmm. But that is such a badass moment when Stark is like, "Okay, yeah, I'm going to sacrifice my life for the good of humanity," type of thing. And that's a moment that I thought that this movie really did benefit from having the previous movies, right? Like that there's this through line you can see of he starts off as a selfish guy, and if you didn't have Iron Man 1 and 2 to lead up to this, that decision might not have had as much resonance.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really like that a lot.
In fairness, though, he's kind of had the same arc twice previously. Like in every film, including the Avengers, like Iron Man has that thing where he's kind of a selfish asshole, but at the end he does what's best for humanity.
One of the questions that this movie brings up is like, okay, one could argue that Iron Man 2, as some people have argued, Iron Man 2 really suffered because of all the Avengers stuff that they brought into it. And all the kind of pre-planning that didn't seem to have much to do with the main plot. Mm-hmm. It kind of bogged things down. It killed the pacing. And in the end, it didn't seem like it was very relevant at all. I mean, he was rejected from the program anyway. So was it really worth potentially, I wouldn't say ruining, but dramatically impacting that movie in a negative way for this movie? Like, did that make it, does this movie make it worth it, is the question. Drew, any thoughts on that?
I would say that ultimately, yes, the ends justify the unfortunate middle, but I don't. It was also a function of, okay, the sequel needs to go first because we've already established that this is the most successful of the series. I think they were in a position there where Favreau kind of got pushed into making the movie before anybody was ready, before the script was ready.
Yeah.
And it was a matter of, at that point, release dates in order to get to the Avengers. And it even more than the story function, it was a timing function. And I really feel like that's probably why Favreau isn't coming back for another Marvel movie.
Right.
Like he got put in the middle there. And while I think there's a lot of good stuff in Iron Man 2, there's good individual moments and there's neat ideas and images. It's not a film. It's not cooked properly. And it's really frustrating. You know, talking about the Stark, how he's basically the same arc 3 times. It's less noticeable for him in this one because he does get to play the variation on it. than Thor, who I think really suffers from that in this movie. Because after his fight with the Hulk, he's in a field, and next time you watch the movie, check this out. He's in that field, evidently, for about 5 hours, standing and looking at his hammer.
I thought the exact same thing seeing it a second time.
And there's a weird gap of time there where it's like, what's he doing? Is he thinking, am I worthy for 5 hours? Pick your hammer up, second things. And it's strange because for him, that is exactly the same character arc played on a miniature scale.
Any thoughts on that question, guys? Like, do you feel like, do you even agree with the premise, Devindra and Adam, that that the previous movies were affected in some way by having to seed in Avengers elements? Were they affected negatively, and was it worth it in the end?
I think it kind of depends, right? Iron Man 1, it seems like when Favreau made that, he was kind of doing this cool thing. Nobody knew how huge that would become. And then, like, tying in Nick Fury at the end was just kind of an afterthought to kind of set everything up.
Right.
And that was cool. It was surprising. But, by the time we got in Iron Man 2 and then we got the connections on all the other movies, things started to seem maybe just a little bogged down by it. Iron Man 2, like, I like parts of Iron Man 2 as well. I didn't hate it as much as everyone else, but it seems pretty clear with the S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff that Favreau just didn't care. And especially when it came to like dealing with Scarlett Johansson's character,
right,
and other individual scenes, like it felt really by the numbers. And like you look at this movie and you look at what you could do with Black Widow, and also how to shoot her action better too. It's not hard; you just have to give a damn. So it's that sort of thing. Like when you're a part of this machine, it beats down the directors who may be trying to do their own independent thing.
Right. And it was kind of cool and subversive when it was like an afterthought type of thing. It was like this inside joke that we were all in on. But then for Iron Man 2, they brought that inside joke to the forefront, and it wasn't as cool anymore, and it actually hurt the storytelling. But Devindra, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was also going to say, there was talk like people were really disappointed when Favreau ended up not doing the Avengers. Like at one point, he seemed like the key person for it. I'm actually very glad at this point that he didn't do it because it's clear that since Iron Man 2 that he just didn't care about this whole sort of franchise. But also like what we saw from stuff like freaking Cowboys and Aliens and the issues with that movie as well. Whedon ended up being the perfect person to make this movie. I actually hope he doesn't come back because I'd rather see him go on and do other cool and interesting stuff. Let him have this huge blockbuster hit, his first like genuine success ever. I want to see where he goes with that. The other thing that I'm worried about is all the other Marvel movies. Kind of, you can only go downhill from here in a sense. Like unless somebody makes something truly amazing. But I'm really not holding out too much hope for that.
Adam, any thoughts on that point? Or if not, I have another question.
I will say it's worth it just because I love the Avengers so much. I think they waited too long to bring Joss Whedon on board. I think like he should have been the one figuring out how to plant the seeds building up to this film.
That's true.
And I think he would have done an amazing job at it because as you see, like even in 2.5 hours period, like he manages to actually plant a lot of seeds that hadn't even been properly planted before. Like in a sense, he nullified everything that came before just because like we were saying about Black Widow wasn't really a character before this point. Agent Coulson wasn't really a character before this point. This version of the Hulk is the best version of the Hulk that's been seen so far, and it doesn't actually feel like either of the two previous incarnations. So much of what he does with this film, it's basically just like he's fixing what was not done properly before. And in a sense, I think he kind of made the best sequel to all of those films. Like, I mean, he made the best version of what those characters could be in a film. And yeah, I'll say it's worth it just because we got this film out of it. But I don't necessarily think that means what came before is really like justified in the way they handled it.
Mm-hmm. So one of the questions that I have after I see this movie is like, where do they go from here? Because there was a recent article, I think it was at denofgeek.com, Matt Singer wrote about this at Critic-Wire, about stakes in action movies, right? And how many of the recent action movies we've seen that have been great have really low stakes. Like The Raid, for instance, right? Like just one building, a bunch of like 20 guys. compare that to like Die Hard, where the stakes increase with every movie, right? First, it's one building, then it's like an airport, then it's a city, then Die Hard 4, it's the United States, and now Die Hard 5, it's probably going to be the whole world. And how like the movies have gotten progressively worse, right? Or I like Die Hard with a Vengeance a lot, but Die Hard 1 was obviously the best. Here we have a movie where, like, I guess the city's in jeopardy, right? But arguably the whole world. Mm-hmm. So
we didn't really see much stuff across the world. It was mainly New York. It's the ship and then New York.
But how are they going to up the stakes from here is the question. And we get that little post-credit sequence where I believe it's Thanos that is reintroduced, right?
From the people I've talked to, it looks like Thanos. That would be a really interesting, like, just cosmic scale battle in a way. But at the same time, like, most characters can't really exist in with a fight like that. That's mainly Thor, I guess.
Right. So I just wonder where they're going to go from here. You know, Drew, any thoughts on this?
Well, I think the end of this movie, and I've heard some of their plans, but the end of this movie really does point the direction, which is I think Kevin Feige has a real love of the weird Marvel characters and the weird Marvel universe, and I think that he's ready to start pushing into outer space and into the strange magic world of Doctor Strange, and like I think we're going to start seeing them take some chances now because they've done it. They made it to the benchmark that they had set for themselves, which is, can we get to the Avengers? Yes, we can. Okay. And we did it in such a way that I feel like now we have permission to experiment. And so we are going to see the invaders, and we're going to see, you know, we're going to see the Defenders of the Galaxy, and I think we're going to see Doctor Strange, and I think we're going to go into some weird areas that we haven't seen on film before, and they're going to have to dream a little bigger because they know that as far as the individual heroes go, yeah, they'll still have their adventures, and they'll have to build really good, smart, standalone stories. But to continue to expand the universe, now it's time. They've brought in some of the elements that have always made Marvel kind of. I mean, this is that comic book thing where if you're willing to go with them, and it feels like by the end of the film people are, okay, let's try it. Let's see what happens.
Right. Mm-hmm. Very cool. Well, any other thoughts, guys, before we wrap things up for today?
Yeah, I actually wanted to comment on. We're talking about like the scale. First of all, I actually think it was really smart, Joss Whedon, in terms of how he made this the citywide battle. Which you feel like for the Avengers, like more should be at risk, but they made it more like a strategy, like keep everything contained in the city, make sure it doesn't expand beyond that. So they actually made it about like this team struggle to keep everything just in this one area. So I found that interesting. Also, I found interesting that you have these various levels, like these characters aren't like evenly matched. I mean, they find interesting ways to make them seem evenly matched, but Captain America really is out of his element here. And I love that Joss Whedon played that up. He showed that like the comment at the end about him getting tired, like bringing back when he said previously, it's like, I think I've slept enough for one lifetime. This guy, like, he can't keep up with these other superheroes, and yet they still make him feel vital because you have like that woman in the news broadcast at the end talking about how like Captain America saved me, and like I'll always be grateful for that. So like even if it's just saving one person, that means something. I really
something wonderful about him having his moment where he actually gets a pop culture reference.
That was incredible.
That was the light he plays. I get that. I know what that is.
I love the line about God, where that's such a Whedon thing to make Captain America say, "There's only one God, ma'am." And I don't think they dress like, or he dresses like that.
That was kind of interesting, because that's something that only that character in this movie could have said. Yeah. But Adam, one of my favorite moments, and not for the reason it was intended, was when Captain America is like QBing the whole thing, right? And he's like, "Okay, Iron Man, you fly up to the thing and take that guy out. Thor, use your hammer to bash this thing in. Hulk, you take out those planes. Black Widow, shoot some guys." It's like there's clearly like an asymmetry between like what the characters can do. Like she only has.
Well, also you miss Hulk smash. Like that is
the Hulk line was
thing. That must have been like one of the most fun things to write in the script. Like Hulk, smash.
Well, I was just saying there's like this disparity. It reminded me of that scene in there was this Family Guy episode where all of the Family Guy characters get special powers, except Meg's special power is she can grow fingernails really fast, and like all of them can do stuff except for her. It was like, yeah, like these guys have like superhuman powers. Black Widow is just a really good agent, right?
She's an acrobatic
Yeah.
like spy. But that's
So
about it.
there
But
was some kind
like
of-
she's alongside Hawkeye, the guy who keeps using his bow and arrow, when clearly like it worked out in certain scenes, but clearly you may want to upgrade that weaponry at some point. Maybe.
All right. Anyway,
But again, like that's what Joss Whedon understands, that he recognizes that, and that's why he's able to not just. I mean, obviously, Captain America has always been sort of the leader of the Avengers, or I don't know always, but that's what he's known for. He's known as being the leader of this team,
Right.
and I think Joss Whedon lets him become the leader very organically, and actually makes him feel vital in that way.
Yeah. I'm just glad that this movie exists and Dave can finally understand why people gush about Joss Whedon, because you haven't seen, you definitely haven't seen all of Buffy or Angel, but you haven't even seen Firefly, dude.
yeah, I'm pretty bad.
So this is why
Yeah.
like, he inspires such love and devotion. It's a love for the characters. It's snappy dialogue, and it's generally knowing what you want to do.
And now it's really amazing, spectacular action. So
That's true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Drew, what were you going to say?
Before now, we've never seen what Joss Whedon can do with $220 million.
And it really does feel like this is a crystallization for him. It's for Marvel. They trust the right guy. It's kind of a perfect storm, and I do think it's going to be something that we look back at in 5 or 10 years, and we're going to be amazed that for Whedon, he got his moment, and God only knows what he's going to produce after this. And for Marvel, I hope it indicates to them writer-directors are a really important thing, because you need a voice, not just the ability to marshal the resources. You know, I'm thrilled that Shane Black is handling Iron Man 3, because there's a case, again, of Robert Downey Jr. trusting a director wholeheartedly, a writer with a real voice. If nothing else, maybe this will start to indicate to them, trust people who have a real handle and a real voice, and just let them go make the movies. Don't micromanage quite the same extent that they have in the past.
I think that's a really good place to leave it on, Drew. So we got listener emails coming up, but in the meantime, Drew McWeeny, you want to tell people where they can find more of your work on the internet this week?
Absolutely. I'm at hitfix.com, and my blog is called Motion Captured. And please stop by. We have interviews from the Avengers this week, and my ongoing projects like the James Bond countdown we're doing, and it's a good time to stop by, and heading out to Cannes in a couple of weeks. So
awesome. And you also have the Motion Captured podcast, which is a great podcast. I wish you would update it more often, but I understand you're a busy guy.
We've unfortunately had a personal snag with my co-host this year, and so it has been it's been kind of a bummer, because I feel like we had gotten a momentum, and we started to get better at what we were doing, and then he kind of he had some real life obligations that landed on him, so we're hoping to get back up and running on that.
Well, it was and is and hopefully will be a great podcast, and obviously there's dozens of episodes available. People can download and listen in the meantime.
Thanks, sir.
But yeah, I mean, Drew, I know what that's like. I'm actually the movers are coming tomorrow. I'm actually moving to Seattle in 2 days, and after I record this podcast, I am packing up my computer for shipping across the country. So this is the last thing that's keeping my computer from being packed up.
Wow.
But anyway, Devindra Hardor, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
I'm on Twitter at twitter.com/Devindra. I write about tech at venturebeat.com, and I also do a Legend of Korra podcast at republiccitydispatch.com.
I'm sorry, I already asked for Devindra. Adam Quigley, your stuff.
Slashfilm.com and twitter.com/alwayswatching.
You can find me at twitter.com/Dave Chensky. That's Dave Chen, SKY. DaveChen.net. Find my other podcasts at TobolowskiFiles.com and GameOfThronespodcast.com. All right, guys. You can always email us at /filmcast@gmail.com. We got a question this week. Gareth from England writes in. /filmcast, I have a predicament. I'd like to share and hopefully gain some helpful advice. I'm from England, and I've just started a new job, a job that I need in a troubling financial climate. The office I work in is fairly open, which creates a nice and welcome social vibe. I was quite happy to learn that a few of my colleagues enjoy movies, and it was great to have something in common. My first week last week went smoothly, and I came in this week positive with this position. However, over the weekend, most of these colleagues saw The Avengers, and this morning have talked about it to death, not spoiler-free, including the ending and post-credits part. I am fuming and disappointed I have to work with these morons that will undoubtedly spoil many future films. Although a keen moviegoer, I never feel the need to rush out and see a film before everyone else. If anything, I prefer to wait a few weeks and share a cinema with less people.
That was your mistake, dude. I feel like I have a lot of sympathy for this guy, but yeah.
Well, let me just finish the email. It says, do I say something and alienate myself early on in this new office? So Devindra, your position is he should have just seen The Avengers the opening weekend.
No, I'm saying like for a movie like this where practically everybody is going to go see it, you kind of have to set yourself up for potential spoilers at some point in life. Like you'll hear it on the train, you'll hear it, among your other friends or something. Not everybody does spoiler warnings, so the only clear way to avoid spoiler warnings is to see the stuff. So that's the thing. Like if you want the convenience to wait, then it's kind of tough, and you have to shield yourself. Oh well. Like this isn't. I think he was asking like, should he confront his coworkers about this? Do not do that. That would make you a crazy person.
Well, okay. So Drew, what are your thoughts on this?
I have my problem with TV spoilers, and certainly I'm having to deal. I've had to adjust to the fact that I will have TV spoiled for me if I don't watch it live. And I think that's kind of the cultural place that we're at now is people really want to have that conversation. And with something like The Avengers, it is such a upfront experience and such a communal thing that they are immediately going to turn around and talk about it. If you work in an office and you don't go see this movie in the first 5-6 days, you're going to hear about it. You're going to hear the ending. You're going to hear, and even if they don't know who they're looking at the ending, they're going to want to know, and they're going to have that conversation and try and sort it out. So there are certain cultural moments that I think you kind of have to accept. You either have them when everybody else does, or it's up to you to figure out how to keep your ears plugged. It's not anybody else's job at that point.
Quig Spot, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Drew. I think it's dependent on like the context. If they're actually having a conversation with you and just like blatantly spoiling it while talking to you about it, then they're being an asshole. But if it's that you're just in the vicinity and there's no way for them to talk about it without you overhearing it, that's it becomes your own problem at that point.
Right.
You shouldn't be able to tell them you can't if they're not even having a conversation with you, you're just there telling them to not talk about it. I think is in itself kind of a dick move.
Yeah, I would actually agree. It really depends on the context. I don't know what your office looks like. He says it's like an open space. So if someone's having a conversation with you, if they're talking with you or you're part of the conversation, I think you have the right to say, "Hey, I haven't seen the movie yet. Can we avoid spoilers?" That's fine.
Step away from the conversation.
But
to exit stage left.
Yeah.
Just a moment.
Yeah. But if there's people that are having conversations that you're not even in, and you just happen to overhear them, then it's kind of, I think it's poor form to butt in on their conversation and say, "Hey guys, I can overhear you. Can you please not spoil it?" You remove yourself from the situation or put on earplugs or something. But obviously the safest way is just to see the movie. So, and hey man, maybe Gareth, you should push yourself a little because, seeing a movie with a lot of people is, in fact, a really taxing and oftentimes traumatizing experience, but sometimes it can also be really thrilling and invigorating. So
if Dave Chen can survive it, so can you, man.
Yeah, barely. I barely survive it. But yeah,
especially for this movie, opening weekend is glory.
Right.